How much would you pay for your next Android phone? A map to lose an internship, and Apple has gotten an itsy-bitsy tiny bit better at diversity hiring. Tech News Tonight is next.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Tonight, episode 402 for Thursday, August 13th, 2015. This episode of Tech News Tonight is brought to you by Braintree. If you're working on a mobile app and searching for a simple payment solution, check out Braintree. With one simple integration, you can offer your customers every way to pay. To learn more and for your first $50,000 in transactions fee-free, go to braintreepayments.com/technight. Welcome, I am Megan Maroney. Let's get into today's big news. Samsung announced two new products today, the Galaxy Note 5 Phablet and the Galaxy S6 Edge Plus smartphone. The Note 5 looks a little bit like a combo of the Note 4 and the Galaxy S6, and it will retail for $740. The Galaxy S6 Edge Plus is very similar to the Galaxy S6 Edge, released in March, but with a 5.7-inch screen. The Edge Plus will also feature a better battery and the ability to launch frequently used apps from the edge of the screen. This phone will retail for $815. Samsung says they'll be available on August 21st, a few months ahead of Apple's new iPhone. If those prices are outside of your budget, then you've got another option. Chinese smartphone company Xiaomi announced the $129 Redmi Note 2. You heard me right. That's $129 for a 2.0 gigahertz smartphone with 16 gigabytes of storage. The $150 Redmi Note 2 Prime clocks in at 2.2 gigahertz, offering a whopping 32 gigabytes of storage. Of course, these devices aren't really available anywhere outside of Asia or Brazil yet. Back in May, we told you about a Harvard student who created a Chrome extension that used your location information that Facebook makes available to friends to create a creepy spying tool. Before Aaron Khanna created the application, he intended to show users how to protect their privacy with it. He was eagerly preparing for an internship at Facebook, but almost immediately after he pointed out the privacy flaw in Messenger, his internship at Facebook was canceled. Khanna told Boston.com that Facebook gave him several different reasons for uninviting him into the internship program. First, they said it was because he scraped data from the site, which he says he didn't do because the data he used was data from his messages. Then they said that the post on Medium he wrote about the app didn't meet Facebook's ethical standards. The Harvard student was able to get another internship in Silicon Valley and said that the back and forth he had with Facebook was its own kind of internship. Apple released its diversity report today. 35% of global new hires were women. U.S. hires were 19% Asian, 13% Hispanic, and 11% Black. Globally, the company is still 69% male. And in the U.S., employees are still 54% white. In case you think anything's changed in a year, it really hasn't. Last year, Apple's global workforce was 70% male and 55% white, not unlike most major technology companies. Wired.com has a story today about how the noise around you could be used for two-factor authentication. Now, two-factor authentication is the ability that some apps or websites give you to have a code sent to your cell phone that you can use in addition to a password. That way, if someone cracks your password, they can't break in unless they also have your phone. The problem with two-factor authentication is that we as humans are generally very, very lazy. Wired.com says scientists are working on ways to make this kind of added security easier on us. Researchers in Zurich, Switzerland have created a way to verify the proximity of your two devices by comparing the ambient noise recorded by their microphones. That way you don't have to waste valuable time entering those verification codes. Coming up, Facebook could learn from Alphabet and robots having babies. But first, this episode is brought to you by Braintree, code for easy online payments. If you're a mobile app developer, you want a payment solution that's easy and fast. This is especially true on mobile. Our attention spans are very, very tiny. We might want to buy your product or service on our phone, but if the payment system is too hard, we might get distracted. Braintree can totally help with that. Braintree is the payment solution used by companies like Uber, Airbnb, and Hotel Tonight. Braintree scaled with these companies from early-stage startups to the successful companies they are today, so Braintree can scale with your business too. Braintree gives you a full-stack payment solution, support for all payment types your customers might want, so start accepting PayPal and Apple Pay, Bitcoin, Venmo, cards, and more, all with a single integration across all platforms. with superior fraud protection, customer service, and fast payouts. To learn more and for your first $50,000 in transactions fee-free, go to braintreepayments.com/technight. All this week, we've been talking about Google's renaming itself Alphabet, restructuring the company in what appears to be a strictly business sort of situation. There are still more questions than there are answers, which is what makes this such an interesting story, in my opinion. Personally, I think they're up to something, but I'm just not sure what. Joining me today is Kurt Wagner, social media reporter at Recode, who has his own take on this week's Google news. Welcome, Kurt.
Hey, Megan, how you doing?
I'm doing well. So your first tweet about the Alphabet news was the suggestion that Facebook might do well to create an umbrella company under which their smaller companies could exist, like Facebook and Instagram, WhatsApp, et cetera. Explain a little bit more about what you were thinking there.
Sure. Well, not necessarily suggesting that Facebook do this, but more thinking out loud that when I heard about the Google or Alphabet stuff, I was like, gosh, this sounds really familiar to another company I pay close attention to, which is Facebook, and that there's a lot of different standalone products within Facebook that, you could envision at some point kind of being their own independent, publicly traded companies. And I think that Facebook is doing some stuff similar to Google in their internet.org efforts, where they're trying to bring internet access to the entire world. That's kind of like Facebook's version of moonshot products. It's not the same as a self-driving car necessarily, or some of the extreme Google Glass things maybe. But Facebook does have Oculus too. That's a totally new virtual reality platform that Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg have talked a lot about as being kind of the next way that people consume content. So as I was thinking about it, I was like, gosh, over the last kind of year or so, when I talk to people about Facebook, people who aren't super familiar with the tech world, I always have to distinguish between Facebook, the product, and Facebook Inc., the company. And so I think that's kind of what Google did here with Alphabet, was they said, hey, there's a holding company, and then there's Google, the product as well. And so I was just thinking that this might work for Facebook someday. I don't know about right now, but maybe someday.
Well, it does seem that Facebook has kind of had that idea for a while. They do things differently. They'll buy something like Instagram. I think if you asked the average person, they might not even know that Facebook owns Instagram. They don't really,
right.
talk about that a lot. Oculus is the same thing. It's not Facebook's Oculus. And it seems like they go that route, whereas a lot of the companies that Google is talking about, besides YouTube, they really just built these from the inside.
Yeah, and I think that Facebook wants to do something similar, right? I mean, they have what's called Facebook Creative Labs, which is this kind of initiative within the company that they're going to build a lot of standalone apps. And really, I don't think any of those have really hit, if you ask me. I mean, you probably don't even know. The average Facebook user probably would have no idea that Facebook Creative Labs exists, and may know one of like the 7 or 8 apps that they've launched. But the idea is that from a I guess, thought process, is you can see that they want to create things and they want to give their employees a chance to create products inside Facebook. And I think, Oculus is probably the best example of kind of being something that's totally separate as of right now from the news feed and from Facebook. And it really probably does belong as its own company. And right now it seems Facebook's already doing that anyway, right? It's letting it kind of operate on its own. I think it's operating out of Los Angeles versus where Facebook's in south of San Francisco and Silicon Valley. So I don't know. I just think that Mark Zuckerberg's vision for where Facebook is going, which is all of these kind of big standalone products, fits really well with what Google seems to be doing right now.
So now Google, a lot of these companies we don't even know about. They keep them very secret. They have these labs. Does Facebook have a lab like that where they're developing all these top secret projects?
Well, not a X lab the way that Google does. At least not that I know of. If it's secret, then it's super secret. But they do have, I mentioned internet.org. They have what they call the connectivity lab, and what they're doing there, they just actually, I think it was 2 weeks ago, rolled out the first plans for a actual plane that they're going to be putting up in the sky to beam internet access down to people around the globe. And so that, I think, is kind of Facebook's version of X Labs right now. It's not nearly as robust or maybe moonshotty as Google has, but you can see that they're trying to think much more big picture than just a social network. And the idea of being able to provide internet access to the whole world, like that's kind of a crazy, ridiculous thought. And the fact that Facebook is building an actual plane to do that no one, a few years ago would have expected Facebook to be building hardware like that. And yet here we are, and they own Oculus, which is going to be building hardware as well. So who knows, but as of right now, I don't know of any secret lab. If you hear anything, please let me know, because I should be aware of that, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, the other similarity between the two of them is, they have these projects that seem great, like Internet.org, of course. Like, it would be great to connect the world, to have these people be able to have the internet. But then we're immediately suspect of it. What's it in it for them? And, what are they getting out of it? Where Google, a lot of their big projects that seem at the outset to be really great and advantageous to the world are really, we wonder, is it just a money-making scheme for them that is somehow nefarious? Those are pretty similar in that way.
Yeah. I mean, both. I mean, look, they're both corporations, right? Like, when it comes down to it, they have shareholders, and they're beholden to those shareholders, and they need to provide revenues and profits and money, and the stock needs to go up, right? That's the goal. And so while it's very noble of Facebook, and actually Google's doing this too, right? They're sending giant balloons up into the sky to do internet, and that's cool. That's great that these companies are thinking, how can we provide internet access to the whole world? And I think that there is something noble about that. At the same time, it'd be foolish to ignore the fact that, well, the more people who have the internet, the more people who can use Facebook and who can use Google, and they are world-known brands. So they're at an advantage there. The more people that have the internet right now, the more users they're going to have, and the more money they're going to make. So, I think it's like, you have to just keep in mind that all the decisions should be made with investors in mind. I'm not saying that means you have to do everything right away to try and turn a profit, but they're not going to invest millions or at some point billions of dollars into these different technologies if they don't see some kind of financial return down the road.
Right, and in some extent, they're kind of weird pet projects. They're they're
Right.
billionaires. They do have a lot of money. They can do things that aren't going to make any money maybe at all. And it's weird. I was thinking about this. I mean, do billionaires always act like this, or because they're tech billionaires, they really think that they can change the world because they've already changed it in some ways with their technology?
Well, I think that Google and Facebook are unique companies in the sense that they are, I mean, the market cap, Google especially, there are just so few companies right now that have as much cash on hand as Google. I'm guessing Apple is probably the only other tech company that's even close. But Facebook's certainly up there as well. I mean, they have a massive market cap right now. And you look at the freedom that money provides someone like a Mark Zuckerberg or a Larry Page, is that, you have way more room just to throw darts at the wall and see kind of what hits. And I'm not saying that you want to necessarily be reckless with all that money, but like, look at Facebook spending $19 billion for WhatsApp. That's when that happened, it just blew everybody's mind. And you look and it's like, they're still not making money from WhatsApp, and they have what could be seen as a rival product with Facebook Messenger. And, but no one's sitting here going, gosh, is Mark Zuckerberg crazy? Because he has money and he can do these kinds of crazy things because he has money. And I think that, if you look back, and I'm not a history expert by any stretch, but, we were talking before we started here about, like, look at when billionaires have bought things like newspapers in the past, or Larry Ellison owns an island. Like, there's a lot of freedom that comes with having a lot of money. Tech right now is a very great place to be if you're an entrepreneur, and I think that you're seeing that with some of the freewheeling plans that these guys have for their companies.
So let's move on to a company that does not have a billionaire CEO right now, Twitter. They purchased Periscope, which is a live streaming app. And you have a story up today that Periscope just announced they have 10 million users. But what does that really mean?
So, yes, so 10 million users, which is actually, Periscope just launched, I believe, at the end of March. And so you think about the fact that in the last 4 months, 10 million people have created Periscope accounts. This is what that means. And I kind of pointed that out in my story, right? They have 10 million users. I said, kinda. And the reason I said kinda is because the way that the industry kind of measures user base is by active users. So when you see, if Facebook says we added 10 million users, or if Twitter says we added 10 million users, they're saying users who have an account and log in every month. Periscope is saying that we have 10 million people who have created an account, not necessarily logging in all the time. But I think either way, I mean, it's an impressive number for an app that's been out for only 4 months. And I think that a lot of people are still trying to figure out what is this whole live streaming thing. When is it appropriate? When isn't it appropriate? And the fact that Twitter is kind of seeing some early success with Periscope, I think it's got to feel really good for them because they haven't had a lot of success with Twitter, growth around the actual Twitter product lately. So this is something they can point to and say, hey, look, this product seems to be catching on a little bit. And I think that's a pretty good sign for the live streaming bulls who are out there.
So do you think they're trying to get younger users with Periscope?
I don't necessarily think it's younger. I mean, when I think of who's attracted to like a live stream, I don't necessarily jump to teens, right? I think with some products, like you think of maybe Instagram or Snapchat, those kind of seem a little bit more logical. They're a little bit more like fun, messagey kind of things. I think with Periscope, I mean, live broadcasting seems to pertain to really all ages. I'm not sure that, my grandmother is going to necessarily pull up a Periscope live feed to get her news. But I think that, people anywhere within their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s could see some real good benefits from an app like this. So I don't necessarily think it's intended just for younger folks. I think it's intended for mobile. And mobile is pretty much everyone now. So at Twitter's point, they're trying to get users any shape or size that they can find. I don't think they're too worried about going after young folks specifically right now. They just need to get more people.
Right. I asked about the younger because yesterday the big news was that they took the 140 character count out of your direct messages. Right. Now you can direct message as long as you want. And this was such a big story, and I just couldn't get my mind around why it was important. But then it was suggested to me that they're trying to be more of an instant messaging app for like Snapchat, like they're trying to go after younger people. Maybe.
Sure. I'm kind of in your camp. I mean, I didn't actually write about that news yesterday, and to me it was mostly because I was like, you know what? There's just not a whole lot to say in my mind. I think that the 140 character limit has been a huge limitation of Twitter this whole time when you talk about messages specifically, because I don't know if you use the DM product often, but every time I'm in a conversation with someone on direct message on Twitter, I feel like I have to send them 4 or 5 messages. Sometimes I have to cut my thoughts off short just so that I can fit it into the text box. And it just seems a little silly, right? And so I think it's nice that they removed that barrier. I don't think that it's all of a sudden like teens are going to flock to Twitter now that they can type, 10,000 characters instead of 140. Sorry, I clearly blanked on that word. But at the same time, I think it's just a necessity to making the product actually useful to their general user base.
So Twitter's going after everyone with Periscope, but who's using it now and what are they using it for?
That's actually a good question. We don't really know. I mean, we know that there are 10 million people who have created accounts, and we know that 2 million people check the app every day. Those are the numbers they announced yesterday. In terms of who those people are, I can only really speculate, but I think what makes Periscope kind of cool is that it goes hand in hand with live events, which is another big part of Twitter, right? So that's why they've been saying all along that Periscope and Twitter make sense. They both specialize in kind of this live, what's happening around you kind of idea. And so the things like when I'm on Periscope, the things I'm seeing, I do see some sports related stuff. I'm a sports fan, so perhaps that's just the nature of like what I'm looking for, or when I'm checking the app is like, for example, when the Warriors were in the playoffs not too long ago, a few months ago in the Bay Area, that was a huge deal. And a ton of people went to the game and they would broadcast their view from the stands. And I thought that was a pretty neat use case.
Is that legal?
Well, I think they're trying to figure that out, and it's interesting. Like some leagues, I believe Major League Baseball has said, go for it. That's totally fine. I don't know if anyone has straight up banned it yet from what I can see, but at the same time, it'll be really interesting to see what happens with football season, because football is coming up very soon, about a month away. And to be honest, like football is the biggest sport in America right now. And they make a lot of money from their broadcasts and their partnerships with, Fox Sports and NBC. So if they feel that these live streams are taking away from their, paid user base, you could see people in the NFL maybe requesting that streams get taken down. I don't know. So we'll have to kind of wait and see. But as of right now, people are still trying to figure it out and determine whether or not it should be allowed.
Right. I think they have already had a lot of copyright takedown notices that Twitter's done some of them and not others.
Right.
But, I don't know if there's a difference between, broadcasting when you're at the game versus broadcasting, your television as you're watching the game that you've paid for. I don't know if there's a difference.
Well, I mean, there was a difference when it came to the Floyd Mayweather-Manny Pacquiao boxing match. If people, will remember, that was a big deal. And I think that was more of an issue because it was being, it was pay-per-view, right? So people had to pay, I want to say it was over $100 for that fight. And then if I just held my phone up to the screen, I'm essentially letting anybody who wants to follow along see straight from my living room what I'm paying $100 to see. And so the pay-per-view folks were like, no, that's not going to work. We're not happy with that. If I'm getting a view from someone who's sitting, 20 rows back in the center field bleachers at Wrigley Field, I don't know if the Cubs are going to be pissed about that because, it's not actually that high of quality. It's kind of fun for a look in, but it's not like I'm going to sit there for 3 hours and watch a whole game from someone's smartphone 20 seats into the stands. So I don't think, in stadiums as big of a deal as kind of like holding it up to the TV where you're really getting a similar view to what you might get if you're sitting in your living room.
So there's no way for broadcasters at this point, people using Periscope, to make money?
Not that I know of, unless, you could, I would think, do the same thing that people are doing on Vine, which is, there's no set way through Vine to really make money. But these folks who are Vine stars are creating deals with, sponsors and saying, hey, I'll mention your product on my Vine if you, give me $10,000 or whatever. And it's actually working, and they're making a lot of money doing it. There's nothing to say that if someone has a really popular Periscope account or a Meerkat account, they couldn't say, hey, I'll mention your app during my conversation on Periscope in exchange for some money. So you could make money, but there's no Twitter's not making money from Periscope right now, and there's no way to do it through the app. You kind of have to be managing these relationships on your own outside of the app.
Right, and I know Instagram and blogs are regulated now by the FCC or how you can advertise. So I don't know if that's general across the board or each new medium has to come up with different laws about that. But I'm sure some people might have something to say if you don't know you're being advertised to on Periscope.
Sure, I would imagine that happens once there's kind of like a certain threshold, right? At least for now, it seems like it's still new enough. I'm not seeing people hawk products on Periscope right now. But I would imagine maybe if you started to see that a lot, or once they roll out their own advertising model, revenue model, then perhaps, that's when the regulation comes in. I would think right now, though, it's just kind of like, if you can figure out a way to get someone to pay you money to mention their product on Periscope, you should probably take advantage of it at the moment and just, make the money while you can.
Well, Kurt, thank you so much. Kurt Wagner is a reporter at Recode. He's at Kurt Wagner 8. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Take care.
Bye.
And finally tonight, Mashable reports that robots can make babies. Researchers at University of Cambridge programmed a robotic arm and gripper to build another robot capable of movement. The mother robot was specifically designed to mimic evolution by using information about the performance of the first baby robots to progressively build more successful ones. Wonderful and scary, right? To be clear, we're not talking about beautiful Battlestar Galactica Cylons here. The baby robots are 6-centimeter 3D printed blue boxes with a single motor connected with glue. But that's the way it always starts, isn't it? That's it for this edition of Tech News Tonight. We want your feedback on the show. What do you like? What do you hate? Email me directly at megan@twit.tv, or you can email the show at tn2, that's the number 2, at twit.tv, or post a comment on our Tech News Tonight Facebook page. You can also subscribe to this show on iTunes or Stitcher, or watch on Spotify or YouTube, or listen on TuneIn. And you can watch live every weekday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Just go to live.twit.tv or go to twit.tv and click on the live button. And don't miss our morning news program, Tech News Today, every weekday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm Megan Maroney. Thanks for watching.
Bandwidth for Tech News Tonight is brought to you by CashFly.com.